Most people think surrendering to God is about giving up. It's about becoming passive. It's just about accepting defeat. Letting life run you over while you smile and call it spiritual. That is not surrender. That is defeat dressed up in spiritual language. Now, this is not anybody's fault. These words have been misrepresented and mistranslated for centuries. Even people who are devotees, who pray to God every single day, misinterpret what surrender is. They have inherited a defeated, resigned, helpless version of surrender that has almost nothing to do with what Krishna actually taught Arjuna on the battlefield thousands of years ago. In truth, what surrender is completely different. If we actually study the wisdom of Gita, and even if we study some of the works of modern science with the works of people like David Hawkins, we understand the true meaning of surrender, which we will discover today. Surrender, as the ancients saw it, is not passive. It is the most active inner mechanism a human being can run. And once you actually see how it works, the entire game you have been playing, that is effort versus ease, control versus trust, willpower versus flow, collapses into one simple practice that you can do in this exact moment. In the next 15 minutes, you will see the exact truth of surrender as Gita speaks of, and also what modern science is now mapping. Not as a belief, not as a feeling, but as something specific you can do. The next time anger comes, the next time fear comes, the next time life delivers what you did not ask for. The ancients had a specific word for this. They called this Sharanagati, the act of complete surrender. And once you truly understand this for what it is, your relationship with your results, with your efforts, with your work completely changes. Most people see surrender as some kind of giving up. It's almost looked at as failure, but it's completely the opposite. When we study Vedanta and Gita, they speak of different dimensions of a human being and different truths of reality. Now, each and every one of us, we assume ourselves to be a person with an identity, with a body and mind. But beyond that, we have something far greater. We are something far greater. Some religions call this the soul or the spirit. Vedanta calls it Atman, the consciousness, the infinite dimension within us. And that infinite dimension can also be looked at as God, because God is the only dimension, God is the only truth that is infinite, that is limitless, that is beyond any boundaries. And that God can be called with various names. We can call it consciousness, we can call it the higher self, we can call it God, we can call it Shiva, Krishna, the Father, and so on. Now, in the 17th chapter, 5th verse, Krishna distills the entire Gita into one single verse. It is called as the Charama Shloka, the ultimate verse. And dying saints have uttered it as their final words for thousands of years. And this is what it states: Sarva dharman parityajya mam ekam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami ma shruchaha. Which translates to, abandon all dharmas, take refuge in me alone, and I will liberate you from all sins. Do not grieve. Now, this sounds reckless and it doesn't make sense when we read this on the surface level, because in our channel at ACS, we always speak of responsibility, of taking responsibility for our actions, of our behavior, of our outcomes as well. Because whatever we are experiencing currently, it's because of our own karma. Then how can we surrender all responsibility? How can we say we are not responsible anymore? Now, what Krishna is telling Arjuna here is not to run away from his responsibility, not to run away from his dharma and his work. But he is teaching Arjuna about the true meaning of surrender, of Sharanagati. And he's asking Arjuna to give up the false notion that Arjuna is doing something, that I am doing something, that sense of doership that we have. That is what this is about. The sense of doership that one has, that is what needs to be given up here. Now, this is how we look at reality from the perspective of Advaita Vedanta at Advaita Conscious Society. Whatever we call Krishna, Narayana, Shiva is this dimension of our own being which is untouched, which is unadulterated, which is beyond all forms and limitations. So we can understand it in this way. There is the ego, which is the body and mind, which is the lower self, as we can put it, which we currently are. Whatever you currently are right now, with a name, with a form, with an identity, let's call it your egoic identity, right? Yet at the same time, right here, right now, you have a deeper dimension to you, which is consciousness, which is Krishna. So, this is the conversation between Krishna and Arjuna. Now, what the higher self is asking the lower self to do is to give up the lower selves, the ego's attachment with the outcomes, and also the ego's sense of doership, right? As we do things in this world, we always have the sense of doership. There is an inherent feeling, an unconscious identification, which always keeps saying, I am doing this, I am speaking, I am listening, I am writing. That sense of me doing things leads to bondage, it leads to karma. And wherever there is karma, there is again bondage and limitation, because we will again have to experience the fruits of those actions and we'll have to experience the outcomes of our actions. But there is a way out. The way out is surrender. Surrender is ultimately not about giving up and becoming small. It in fact is about becoming huge, it is becoming infinite. It is this expansion that happens from the lower self to higher self. Now, that is true surrender. When Arjuna surrenders to Krishna, he became one with Krishna. He began accessing the grace of Krishna, the true support of Krishna. And that is when he actually won the war. And I actually cannot believe that I'm saying all this, because over a decade ago, when I was a completely different kind of a person, devotion didn't interest me at all. I was not interested in devotion or God or anything like this. But right now, if I have to tell you, as we are building this organization and building this movement and doing a lot of things, one of the most profound things that has happened to me in my life is my relationship with the divine, is my surrender to God. Because that gives you a sense of confidence, it gives you a sense of clarity and freedom that almost nothing can give. And that can happen through surrender. Surrender or Sharanagati is something magnificent. It completely removes all forms of attachment, all forms of suffering, all forms of burden, stress, anxiety, and you are finally okay now. You just feel light-hearted because you don't feel like you are doing things anymore. Although it is difficult to practice moment to moment, the ego always wakes up and it begins to take ownership of the action. But as long as we are conscious, we can navigate this and we can develop the skill of surrender. Now, Shankaracharya in his commentary is precise. He says, what is given up is not action, but the doership. So, surrendering the action is different, surrendering the doership is different. Even after Gita, Arjuna still fought the war because it was his responsibility, it was his dharma. He didn't give up his actions. What he gave up after the teaching of Gita was the doership. He stopped believing that it was him who was doing things. He surrendered his entire self to Krishna. And then he just began to act from that inspiration, from that intuition, and from that place of surrender. And then he won the war. So, similarly, we should never misinterpret surrender as passiveness, as doing nothing. Surrender is not laziness. Surrender is active participation in life, but we do not hold the burden of doership. That's it. And that is truly liberating. Action doesn't stop while the grip on action, that sense of doership, stops. And if we decode this verse a little deeper, where Krishna says, Sarva Dharma Parityajya, he is asking Arjuna to abandon all dharma, all responsibilities, all sense of doership, and surrender to him, to the higher self, to the infinite consciousness. Because it is our choice. If we want the doership to be associated with the lower self, with the ego, we can continue to live that way. That's how most people, anyways, live. But that comes with its own demerits, disadvantages. It causes stress, it causes burden, it causes a sense of struggle in life. And not just that, results are always limited. Why would you act from the lower self, which has limited power, which has limited potential, when you can act from the place of the higher self, which has infinite power and infinite potential? That is what surrender enables us to do. And in the second part of the same verse, Krishna says, Take refuge in me alone, and I will liberate you from all sins. Do not grieve. That is sort of an advantage with devotee, where that God, that infinite intelligence will begin to take responsibility for our life. And then life becomes extremely easy and effortless. Now we will quickly look at what the work of Hawkins say about surrender, so that we have the context, and then we will move to the important part, that is the mechanism to make it happen within our lives. David Hawkins, an American psychiatrist who did more than 40 years of consciousness research, published a book called Letting Go: The Pathway of Surrender. His discovery was that every form of suffering, anger, fear, anxiety, grief, is held in place by one inner act, that is resistance. And the mechanism is to allow the feeling and drop the inner posture of resistance, and the feeling dissipates on its own. So he says resistance is what keeps suffering alive. And the moment resistance stops, the feeling has nothing to hold on to. It runs through you and leaves. With this, let us come to the mechanism. First, let us understand this intellectually through the Vedantic terminology, so that we are going deep into not just a short-term technique, but a long-term, deep understanding of what this reality and truth is about. And there are three things that we need to understand, and there are three levels to this understanding here. One is Viveka, second is Neti Neti, and third is about Sakshi. And the amazing thing is, even though there is a gap of thousands of years from what Shankaracharya taught us to the modern psychiatry, even the work of Hawkins and Letting Go is very similar to Neti Neti. It is just in a different language. Viveka is a quality that we need to develop, which can be developed by understanding these teachings of Vedanta, by understanding what is real and unreal, by looking at reality clearly with the correct perception, with a clear perspective. We will understand what is happening with our life, why we are getting stuck, why we are suffering, and what is the solution to it. Viveka is the discrimination between the right and wrong, the real and unreal. Then comes Neti Neti, a signature technique of Shankara, where he uses this to discriminate the truth from whatever is the untruth. Neti Neti means not this, not this, not the body, not the mind, not the objects of the universe. When we remove everything that we are not, we end up with who we actually are. The Nirvana Shatakam, Mano, Buddhi, Hankara, Chittani Naham. It is the same practice of Neti Neti. Shankara says, I'm not the body, not the mind, not the four parts of the mind. I'm not my responsibilities. I'm not my relationships. But Chidananda Rupa Shivoham Shivoham. I'm the infinite consciousness and bliss. I'm Shiva himself. I'm God himself. So that is Neti Neti. So first, we are developing clarity on the reality and what we are and what we are not intellectually. Then we use Neti Neti to remove everything that we are not. Then we get into Sakshi, which is the witness, where we just silently see reality for what it is. Now, let us combine this with the method of Hawkins, and let's practice this right now in the next minute. I want you to just close your eyes for this, and you can even take a deep breath and let go. And identify a resistance in your body. Identify that stress, this anxiety, that feeling of stuckness, some kind of weight or a pattern that exists within you right now. Just identify that. Where do you feel it? Do you feel it in the chest? Do you feel it in the head? Do you feel it in your gut? If not, just pay attention to that feeling or that kind of energy and emotion. The step one, which is about noticing and recognizing that. Now, step two, amplify that, whatever that is, that anger or jealousy, hatred or stress. Just let it run through your entire body, let it run through your entire system, accept it, embrace it, don't resist it, and let it run through you. Allow it to flow through the entire body. Just be open to it, welcome it. For the next 10 seconds, just let it fully exhaust itself. Now, just surrender and let it go. Now, just loosen your body and feel that lightness and come to the Sakshi Bhava, the witness mode. Just sit quietly, don't do anything, and just passively see reality for what it is. Just see your thoughts, see what is outside, see what is inside, without engaging with anything, where you're just calmly seeing everything. You might have gotten a glimpse here, but the more you do it, the more you expand from the limited self to the infinite self, and that is the goal.